I have been someone who loved my own company. I am Kimberly, and I am 30 years old teaching physics at the college_family, marriage. All that jazz, not really on my map. Inheritance from my granddad, this quaint little spot is mine all the way. It is my piece in the hustle and bustle. So there I was, hitting the pavement in the park for my morning run, when this scene unfolds right in front of me. A guy not watching where he's going takes a spectacular dive, and his phone goes flying. The thing hits the ground and bam, it's a goner, shattered screen, bits everywhere, the whole 9 yards. He's cussing up a storm, face all twisted in frustration. Clearly, the phone's the least of his worries. Looks like he's about to tear his hair out. Great, just great, this is all I needed today, he groans, staring at the remains of his phone like it personally offended him. I slowed down, kind of hovering, not sure why. Maybe it's the look of utter defeat on his face. You need to borrow a phone? I ask, keeping it casual. He looks up, kind of surprised that someone is talking to him. Yeah, that'd be great, actually. Need to call my folks, tell them I botched up something important. I unhook my phone from my armband and hand it over. Don't sweat it, just make it quick. Yeah, sure. Thanks a ton, he says, and he's on the phone in a heartbeat, pacing a small circle as he talks. His voice is all polite now, a total switch from the cursing fit seconds ago. Listen, I've had a bit of a mishap. He's glancing at me. A silent plea for a bit more time. I nod, letting him know it's all right. Finishing up, he hands back my phone with a sheepish look. Thanks, I owe you one. I'm Jack, by the way. Kimberly, and forget about it. Just try not to smash it next time, yeah. I say, half joking. He chuckles, running a hand through his hair. Deal. I'll make it up to you. Coffee sometime. I raise an eyebrow. Are you planning on throwing the coffee on the ground too? Elas, a genuine hearty sound. Promise I'm less clumsy with coffee cups. What do you say? I consider it for a moment. Not usually my thing, chatting up strangers, but something about this feels different. All right, Jack, coffee. But if you're late, I'm leaving, I say with a smirk. That coffee with Jack, it turned out to be the first of many. Something about him made me toss my stranger danger manual out the window. He was easy to talk to, with a laugh that made you want to join in, even if the joke was lame. We found this little hole-in-the-wall cafe, the kind where the coffee's strong enough to put hair on your chest, and the owner knows everyone by name. We became regulars, our conversations stretching from physics to philosophy to the downright ridiculous. So you're telling me if you could, you'd teach physics to cats. Jack asked me one day, a mischievous twinkle in his eye. I took a sip of my coffee, playing along. Absolutely. Imagine the breakthroughs. Schrödinger's cat would have a whole new meaning. He laughed, shaking his head. You're nuts, you know that, right? Take one to know one. I shot back, smiling. Things with Jack just clicked. It wasn't long before our coffee dates turned into dinner dates, movie nights, and lazy Sundays spent doing nothing together. It was easy, comfortable, and frighteningly quick. One evening, as we were closing down the cafe, with our lingering goodbyes, Jack turned serious. Something I'd come to learn meant he had something important on his mind. Kimberly, he started, hesitating a bit. We're great together, aren't we? I nodded, curious about where this was leading. Well, I was wondering, what do you think about making this a forever thing? My heart skipped. You mean like marriage? Yeah, marriage, he confirmed, his voice firm, but his eyes searching mine for any sign of hesitation. I paused, not because I doubted my feelings, but because the gravity of the decision weighed on me. Yet, looking into his hopeful eyes, I found my answer. Yes, Jack. Let's do it. Let's get married. The whirlwind that was our engagement sped by, and before I knew it, wedding bells were practically ringing in my ears. But there was this one little hiccup before we could say our I does. Jack's folks wanted to meet me. No biggie, right? Wrong. The meet and greet was at their place, which was fancy enough to make you think twice about where you sat. They were polite, but had this way of looking at you, like they were trying to read the fine print on your soul. So Kimberly, his dad starts, smooth like he's practiced this speech a few times. Jack tells us you're a teacher. Physics, was it? Yeah, that's right. I reply, keeping my tone friendly but guarded. And you live in that lovely little house by the park. Quite the inheritance. His mom chimes in, her eyes sharp, trying to pin me down. I just nod, sensing where this is heading, but not wanting to jump the gun. It's just that our Jack is quite the successful businessman, you know. We're just a tad concerned, no offense, dear, that some might be more interested in his financial stability. His dad says, dancing around the real accusation. I couldn't help but laugh, the absurdity of it all bubbling up. Trust me, I've got my own, thanks. Not here for a free ride. Their faces tighten, not expecting my blunt honesty. Or maybe they did, and it was all part of the test. Well, in that case, his mom says, pulling out this document from nowhere, we'd feel more at ease if you two considered a prenuptial agreement. Sure, I shrugged, taking the paper. Makes sense to me. I like knowing where I stand. Plus, my house isn't up for grabs. Their surprise was almost worth the awkward tension. I guess they weren't used to straightforward answers. Jack seemed relieved, squeezing my hand under the table like he was saying thanks for not bolting. So we signed their precious prenup, sealing the deal that what's mine is mine, and what's his is his. Fair's fair, but the taste it left in my mouth was sour, made me wonder what kind of family I was marrying into. Living with Jack in my granddad's house started off as a dream. We'd laugh over burnt toast, dance in the living room to no music, and make plans for every inch of the garden. But like a storm rolling in slowly, things got cloudy, then downright stormy. And wouldn't you know it, the storm had a name, Jack's parents. These two could give lessons in arrogance. From day one, it was like I signed up for a third and fourth roommate who had a key, but never heard of rent. They'd swan into our place like it was a diner, feet up, waiting for the special of the day. And when they hinted they wanted to go on this fancy cruise, but their wallets were too thin, they looked at me like I was the bank. No, I told them, you think I declared war. They threw a fit, calling me stingy, saying I hoarded my cash like some dragon sitting on gold. Word gets around, and soon Jack's asking why I'm not more generous with his folks. Generous, Jack? They practically live off us as it is. I snapped back one night after his parents had left, our sofa and our fridge emptier than promises. Their family, Kim, were supposed to help out, he argued, missing the point by a mile. Helping is one thing, being taken for a ride's another. Your folks think my money's there to spend. That's not happening, I said. Jack went all quiet then, the kind of silence that's louder than shouting. His parents did the same but in their way, by suddenly vanishing. No drop-by, no calls, nothing. They were offended because I wouldn't fund their holiday spree, called me greedy behind my back, said I was living too tight. All because I wouldn't open up my granddad's safe to splurge on them. Ah, the safe, that hulking piece of metal, was more than a place to stash away a few valuable bits and bobs. It was a slice of history, a connection to my granddad. But to them, just a vault they hadn't cracked. The months without Jack's folks were like the quiet before the storm. It was a Tuesday, the kind of day you don't expect anything out of the ordinary. I was late coming home from work, bogged down with papers and the remnants of a headache that wouldn't quit. Walking in, I found Jack's parents parked on our sofa, remote in hand, flipping through channels like they owned the place. Evening, I managed, trying to keep the edge out of my voice. "Oh, there she is. We were wondering if you'd join us tonight," his mom said without looking away from the TV. I glanced at Jack, hoping for some backup, but he was engrossed in something on his laptop. Sighing, I headed to the kitchen, only to find they'd helped themselves to leftovers I was planning to make into dinner. That was it. I was done playing nice. "Okay, listen up," I said, striding back into the living room. "This is not a hotel, and I am not the maid." Jack looked up, startled, while his parents finally paused their channel surfing. "What's gotten into you?" his dad asked, frowning. "I'm tired," I shot back, tired of coming home to find you two camped out here, eating my food, and treating this place like it's yours. It's not. The room went silent. You could have heard a pin drop, or in this case, the tick of the clock marking the moment everything changed. You could have heard a pin drop, or in this case, the tick of the clock marking the moment everything changed. His mom stood, smoothing her skirt. "Well, I never. Here we thought we were family, but clearly we were mistaken." "That's not what I'm saying, and you know it." "I'm just asking for some respect, some space," I tried to explain, but the look on her face told me she wasn't buying it. Jack's dad chimed in, his voice cold. "Seems like someone's true colors are showing. We just wanted to be close to our son, but apparently that's too much for you." I looked at Jack, searching for some sign of support, but he was torn, caught between us and them. "Maybe it's best if we leave," his mom said, her voice laced with hurt I wasn't sure was entirely genuine. "Maybe that is best," I agreed, more to myself than anyone else. They left, and with them, the false pretense of one big happy family. Jack and I stood in the silent aftermath, the rift between us wider than ever. The breaking point hit like a wrecking ball. Jack had always been a bit of a mama's boy, but I never figured it would get this bad. His folks, they had their hooks in deep, and Jack danced to every tune they played. It wouldn't have been so bad if it stopped there, but no. Jack started treating me like I was part of the staff in my own house. "Hey, can you whip up something nice for dinner?" "I'm starving," Jack would say, dropping his bag by the door like he owned the place. "Jack, I've been on my feet all day, teaching and grading. How about you cook tonight?" I'd reply, trying not to let my irritation bubble over. But instead of understanding, he'd huff, puff, and make it seem like I was the one being unreasonable. And let's not even start on the Fridays he'd roll in past midnight, reeking of booze, with that "what's the big deal" look plastered on his face. One evening, I'd had enough. "We need to talk, Jack. This isn't working," I said. He just stood there, swaying slightly, with that clueless look of his. "What's not working? Us, Jack. Us. Your parents treat this place like a free hotel. You treat me like I'm here to serve. And I'm tired all the time. Tired." I could have said a lot of things then. Could have apologized. Could have promised to change. But no. He got all defensive, as if I was attacking him out of the blue. "That's not fair, Kim. You knew what my family was like," he shot back. "Yeah, and I thought I was marrying you, not signing up to be the family doormat," I snapped. That was the moment when the last thread snapped. We looked at each other, really looked, and saw the chasm between us, too wide to bridge, too deep to fill. I think we should get a divorce," I said, the words tasting bitter. Jack's reaction was a mixture of shock and relief. It was clear this had been a long time coming for both of us. But when he told his folks, the glee in their voices was something else. "We always knew she wasn't right for you, son. Good riddance, and thank heavens for that prenup. His mom had chirped over speakerphone, her voice a little too loud, a little too cheerful. Jack packed his bags that night, his movements mechanical. There was no dramatic goodbye, no tearful plea for reconsideration. Just the soft zip of a suitcase and the click of a door. Life's funny, you know. Just when you think you've hit rock bottom, fate throws you a curveball. For me, that curveball was a lottery ticket, a last-minute buy on a whim, because hey, why not? My life was already a mess. Might as well throw a couple of bucks at a dream. The morning I found out I won, it was like any other, except my phone wouldn't stop buzzing. I thought it was a mistake, a practical joke maybe. But no, there it was. My ticket, my numbers staring back at me from the screen, winners through and through. So there I was, staring at the lottery ticket in my hand, the kind of stunned where you can't decide if you want to laugh or cry. $3 million. It felt like a joke, considering the mess my life was at that moment. Divorce papers not yet signed, and my soon-to-be ex and his folks were nothing but a headache I couldn't shake. The universe must have a sense of humor, because the next thing I know, Jack's car pulls up, him and his folks all smiles and fake warmth. They come barging into my place like it's some family reunion. "Kim, darling, we heard the news." What a blessing, his mom starts, laying it on thick. "Let's put all this unpleasantness behind us, H. We're family." Jack chimes in, all hopeful. "Yeah, babe, think about it. We can start fresh, really make a go of it this time." I couldn't help it. I laughed, not the happy kind, but the kind that's sharp around the edges. Start fresh with what? Your folks running the show? No thanks, I'm good. Then Jack, oh Jack, he gets this look like he's been wronged, and says, "Come on, Kim, that's cold. You know I deserve half of that money. It's only fair." Fair? Let's talk about fair, Jack. You and your parents treating me in my place like some kind of free-for-all, and now you want half of my win. Not happening. His face went all kinds of red, anger, embarrassment, take your pick. His parents, too, looked like they'd swallowed lemons, all puckered and sour. According to our prenup, that money is mine. All mine. You got that? I said, holding his gaze, feeling a kind of power I hadn't felt in a long time. He sputtered, looking to his folks for backup, but I wasn't done. "And just so we're clear, this ticket," I waved it in the air before sliding it into my safe, "is staying right here under reliable protection." Their eyes, oh man, their eyes were like cartoon characters, almost popping out of their heads. It would have been funny if it wasn't so pathetic. Jack tried to argue more, but I cut him off. "No, Jack, it's over. This ticket is my ticket out of this mess, our mess, and you're not getting a dime." They left after that. Not much else they could say. The door clicking shut behind them sounded like the end of an era. My era of playing the good wife, the understanding partner. Then I rang up my sister, spilling the beans about my sudden windfall. We spent hours on the phone, dreaming big, trips abroad, fancy cars, you name it. The kind of chat that leaves your cheeks aching from smiling too much. And guess what? I added as our call was winding down. Jack already got his eyes on the prize, acting like we're suddenly best buddies again. My sister cackled on the other end. "You'd better hide that ticket somewhere Fort Knox couldn't crack, especially from those vultures." I laughed. "Oh please, I've got it, all under control. It's tucked away nice and safe." Fast forward a week, and I'm jetting off to a teaching conference, my mind a whirlwind of lectures and potential networking. Not once did I suspect what was brewing back home. Coming back to an empty space where my granddad's hefty safe used to sit, you'd think I'd freak out. But no, I just burst out laughing, knowing Jack and his folks. I had a hunch about who the culprits were. Sure enough, as the sun dipped and the evening rolled in, Jack's frantic voice came blaring through my phone. "Kim, you need to fix this now." He was practically shrieking. "Fix what, Jack?" "The fact that you and your parents are a bunch of Keystone cops." I couldn't help the snark. "It's not funny. We're at the police station. They think we tried to steal the lottery ticket." His voice was a mix of panic and disbelief. "The ticket. Oh, that precious piece of paper. Except the real kicker. The one in the safe was a decoy, a copy I'd made just for kicks. The real deal was with me, secure in my purse." The image of them huddled around my granddad's old safe, visions of dollar signs in their eyes only to find a worthless piece of paper, was too good. I held with laughter, the sound echoing off my empty walls. You mean to tell me you stole my safe for a fake ticket?" I managed between fits of laughter. There was silence, then a muffled curse. "You can't do this to us, Kim. It's not right." "Right, Jack. The moment you decided to break into my house and steal my stuff, you threw right out the window. Enjoy explaining that to the cops." The call ended with a click, and I spent the rest of the evening laughing, the sound bitter but liberating. Imagining their faces, the moment they realized they'd been played, was a balm to the months of turmoil they'd put me through. The next day, I headed to the police station to give my statement. The look on Jack and his folks' faces when I walked in was priceless. They looked like they'd seen a ghost, a mix of guilt and sheer panic. "Kim, thank God you're here. Tell them this is all a misunderstanding." Jack blurted out, his eyes darting around, looking for an ally in me. I just stared at him, letting the silence hang heavy for a moment. A misunderstanding? Is that what we're calling breaking and entering these days? His parents started in on their spiel, tripping over their words, trying to paint themselves as victims of circumstance. It would have been comical if it weren't so pathetic. "Listen, I only came here to make things right," I said, cutting through their babble. Jack perked up, a glimmer of hope in his eyes. "So you'll help us?" I nodded, reaching into my bag. "Yes, by giving this to the officers." I pulled out the real lottery ticket, the legitimate claim to my winnings, and handed it over to the police officer standing by. Jack and his parents gasped, their faces going from hopeful to horrified in a split second. "That's the real ticket. The one you all were so desperate to steal was a fake, a decoy," I stated, my voice steady and clear. The officer took the ticket, looking between it and me. "This will certainly help clear things up," he said, noting down something in his notebook. "But why? Why would you trick us like that?" Jack's mom wailed, looking every bit the part of the wronged party. "Why? Maybe because breaking into someone's house and stealing is wrong." "You brought this on yourselves," I retorted, my patience wearing thin. Jack stood there, mouth agape as the realization sank in. "So what now? Are we going to jail?" "That's not for me to decide," I said, turning to leave. "But maybe next time you'll think twice before betraying someone who trusted you." After the whole debacle with the fake lottery ticket and the stolen safe, things moved quickly. The cops had enough to open a criminal case against Jack and his folks for breaking and entering, not to mention attempted theft. It was a mess, but a part of me felt vindicated seeing them finally face some consequences for their actions. The divorce papers came through not long after. Signing them felt like lifting a massive weight off my shoulders. It was official. I was free from Jack and all the drama that came with him. And the best part, I got my granddad's safe back. It was a little worse for wear after its adventure, but having it back in my house felt like getting a piece of my soul returned. I had the winning ticket cashed, the money securely tucked away, and a whole lot of options in front of me. But first, I needed to celebrate this fresh start This new beginning I fought hard for. I called up my sister, the first person who rode this crazy train with me from the get-go. "Hey sis, how about a celebratory dinner on me?" I offered, feeling lighter than I had in months. "You kidding? I wouldn't miss it for the world." "You deserve this, Kim," she replied, her voice bubbling with excitement. That evening, sitting in a cozy corner of our favorite restaurant, we toasted to new beginnings and the future. "So what's the first thing you're going to do with your winnings?" my sister asked, sipping on her wine. I thought about it for a moment. First, a vacation somewhere far, with lots of sun and no memories of the past few months. Then, I don't know, maybe start a charity or invest in something meaningful. Something that makes a difference, you know. She nodded, her eyes sparkling. "That sounds just like you, Kim. Always thinking of others." After dinner, walking back to my car, my sister looped her arm through mine. "You know, I'm really proud of you, Kim. You handled everything with such grace." I smiled, a genuine smile that reached deep into my soul. "Thanks, sis. Couldn't have done it without you." As I drove home, the streets bathed in the soft glow of the streetlights, I felt a sense of peace. The kind of peace that comes from closing a long, turbulent chapter of your life and stepping into a blank page, ready to start anew. I had plans to make, dreams to chase, and for the first time in a long time, I was excited about what the future held. Sure, the road ahead might have its share of bumps and turns, but I was ready to face them head on, with my head held high and my heart open to whatever comes next.
I thought you were cleverer, Eva, marrying Michael. Guess you're just another gullible woman. I tightened my grip on the checkbook. What do you mean, Ava? Aaron took a step closer, an icy smirk on his face. Enough. Hand over the checkbook now, or we finalize the divorce. You have no idea what you're starting here. I spat back, feeling my pulse quicken. With a dismissive chuckle, he shrugged. We'll see about that. 5 years. That's how long it's been since Michael's accident. Aaron, Michael's best friend, was there from the start, supporting me through the grief. A year after Michael died, I remarried. Aaron seemed like a lifesaver, stepping in just when I needed someone. I convinced myself that he loved me. But now, with his demanding eyes locked on the checkbook, I saw it all clearly. The subtle lies, the mounting demands. Aaron was never in this for love. He wanted control, and I had let him weave his web around me. I handed over the checkbook slowly, watching Aaron's triumphant smile. Inside, I was boiling over, but outside I maintained my calm. Aaron flipped through, checking the entries. Good. Now let's talk about the account changes I've been considering for us. There it was again, that word us, but every time he said it, I felt more like a pawn than a partner. I didn't respond immediately, letting the tension linger. Michael would have been smarter about this, you know, he added, his eyes not meeting mine. Those words hit like a punch to the stomach. Michael, always the comparison. Taking a deep breath, I willed my voice to stay steady. What exactly did you have in mind, Aaron? Just some reallocations, some investments. You'll be fine with it, he said, pocketing the checkbook. Investments. Right, for his mother's medical bills are more likely to continue his string of lavish purchases. What had happened to the man I thought I knew? Aaron, we need to talk. Seriously. I was losing my patience. This isn't working. He raised an eyebrow. Oh, it's working just fine for me. I couldn't hold back any longer. No, it's not, Aaron. You spend money like water. You're never home, and when you are, you're unbearable. This isn't a marriage. It's a transaction. You're draining me dry. Aaron's face twisted, his charming facade shattered. You think you can threaten me? You don't want this getting uglier than it already is. I took a step back, stunned by the venom in his voice. Are you threatening me? Just giving you a reality check, he said, voice low and menacing. Hand over the life insurance money, get ready for a nasty fight. It was in that moment I understood the full depth of his deceit. No more pretending, no more lies. With every word he spoke, he made my resolve stronger. I would outsmart him. Aaron didn't know it yet, but this was only the beginning. I'd do whatever it took to secure my life from him. He might think he's in control, but that was about to change. The first few months with Aaron were like a dream. We redecorated the house together, planned weekend getaways, and cooked dinner side by side. I began to believe that love had found me again. But gradually things shifted. Aaron started coming home late. At first he had excuses about meetings running over and work piling up. Then the reasons became vaguer. I stayed up waiting, but the silence was the loudest answer I got. One evening I confronted him as he walked in after midnight. "Aaron, we need to talk. What's going on? Why are you always late?" He shrugged, a hint of annoyance in his eyes. "I've told you, Eva, work has been busy." "Every night?" "Yes, every night." His voice rose, and for a moment I saw a stranger standing there. "Why can't you understand? I'm doing this for us." I wanted to believe him, but his words felt hollow. The tension over money began soon after. Aaron demanded more allowance, explaining it was for his sick mother. I agreed without questioning, until I noticed the credit card statements. Expensive dinners, nightclubs, casinos. He wasn't helping his mother. He was enjoying himself. "Aaron," I said, showing him the bills one morning, "these charges don't seem right. We can't afford this lifestyle." He snatched the papers from my hand. "I know what I'm doing, Eva. Mind your own business." "But this is our money," I protested. "We need to be responsible." Responsible, tearing the papers in half. "You think you can lecture me about responsibility? You were the one sobbing over Michael's death. I'm the one keeping this house together." I bit my lip, anger welling up. Since when is wasting money responsible? Aaron's face darkened. "You don't get it, do you? I'm done explaining myself." His attitude grew colder, his absences longer. The man I thought cared about me was fading, replaced by someone I barely knew. One night I returned home to find the living room lights dimmed. Aaron was at my laptop, fingers flying over the keyboard. "What are you doing?" I demanded. "Just managing our finances," he replied, not looking up. "On my private account?" I stepped closer, fury boiling over. "Get out of there, now!" He finally turned to face me, eyes narrowing. "You think you're smart hiding money from me? Well, think again. I have every right to be here." "You have no right to access my private accounts." "We're married, Eva. Everything you have is mine, too." "No, Aaron, that's not how it works. You're crossing a line. Give me the life insurance money from Michael's passing, or it's over. Your choice." His words were a slap in the face. I knew I couldn't trust him. That night, as Aaron slept soundly, I lay awake, plotting my next move. I'd protect myself and my future. There was no running from this now. I would outsmart him, and he wouldn't see it coming. I started working part-time at a local bookstore. It wasn't much, but every dollar mattered now. Aaron had drained our accounts to the point we were barely making ends meet. He spent more time out than in, and I knew I needed a backup plan. When Aaron wasn't home, my mind raced. I stashed bits of my earnings into a secret bank account he didn't know about. It was risky, but it gave me some control, a small fragment of hope. One evening, I got home from work, tired but satisfied. As I entered the house, I noticed the eerie silence. Aaron's car was in the driveway, yet the house felt empty. I went straight to my desk and gasped. Aaron was there, logged into my bank account. "What are you doing?" I asked, my heart hammering in my chest. He didn't even flinch. "I'm managing our money. You're reckless, Eva. You need guidance." "You can't just take control of my account." I moved closer, trying to pull the laptop away. "Your account?" He sneered, gripping the sides of the laptop. "We're married. What's yours is mine." I yanked the laptop out of his hands. "Enough, Aaron. You're not getting your hands on this money. It was Michael's insurance payout, for God's sake." "Michael's dead," he spat back, venom in his voice. "And if you don't watch it, you'll regret it. Divorce, Eva. Think about it." "I have thought about it," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "And maybe that's exactly what I want." Aaron laughed, stepping back. "Go ahead, Eva, but remember, I'll take every last cent. You think the courts will side with you? You're nothing without me." Shaken, I watched as he stormed out. My heart ached with a mixture of fear and anger. That night, I made a decision. Aaron wouldn't get another cent from me. I had to protect myself, and I had to do it now. The next morning, I visited the bank. "I need to change my account details," I told the teller, hands trembling. New passwords, everything. The teller nodded, helping me secure my money. Leaving the bank, I felt a surge of resolve. When I got home, Aaron was lounging on the couch, scrolling through his phone. He looked up, noticing the determination in my eyes. "What are you up to now, Eva?" "Just making sure you don't steal any more from me," he smirked. "Good luck with that. You can't outsmart me." But I knew I could. I pretended to comply with his wishes, all while closing the gaps. I packed a bag with essentials and a few precious memories of Michael. Then I called Jessie, my trusted friend. "I need a place to stay, Jess," I said, desperation in my voice. "Come over, Eva. We'll figure this out together." Leaving Aaron behind, I drove to Jessie's house, the weight of uncertainty lifting with every mile. This was only the beginning. I was ready to fight back, and Aaron was about to learn just how strong I could be. At Jessie's house, I finally felt a sense of safety. Jessie welcomed me with open arms. "Stay as long as you need, Eva. You know I've got your back." "Thanks, Jess," I said, setting my bag down. "I don't know what I'd do without you." "We'll get through this," she assured me, patting my shoulder. "Let's get you settled." For the first time in months, I slept soundly. The next morning, I woke up with a plan. "I need to contact my lawyer," I told Jessie over breakfast. "Good idea. Cover all your bases." She nodded. "And what about Aaron?" I sighed. "He's not backing down. I need to be careful." Jessie handed me her phone. "Call your lawyer now. The sooner you start the process, the better." I dialed the number and explained my situation. "I need to initiate divorce proceedings, and I need to protect my assets." "Understood," my lawyer said. "We'll start the paperwork. Make sure Aaron has no access to your accounts." "Already done," I replied, feeling a bit more secure. "And I'll need to notify the authorities. Aaron's threats are escalating." "Keep records of everything he says or does," the lawyer advised. "It'll help your case." After ending the call, I felt a sense of purpose. Jessie and I put together all the documentation, organized my finances, and ensured that Aaron couldn't touch a dime. As the days went by, Aaron became more desperate. He called repeatedly, leaving angry voicemails. "Eva, you can't run forever. Come back now, or you'll regret it." I saved every message, each one a piece of evidence. One evening, I received an email notification. Aaron had attempted to access our joint account, but was denied. His frustration was palpable even through the screen. "What's the next step?" Jessie asked, seeing the look on my face. "Divorce papers," I said firmly. "He needs to know I'm serious." Sending those papers felt like lifting a weight off my shoulders. I knew Aaron would be furious, but it was a necessary step. A few days later, Jessie and I were sitting together when my phone buzzed. It was Aaron. I answered, putting it on speaker. "You think you're smart, don't you? Sending those papers?" He was livid. "I'm protecting myself, Aaron," I replied calmly. "This is over." "No, it's not," he snapped. "You'll pay for this, I swear." "We'll see," I said and hung up. Jessie looked at me, concerned. "He'll get desperate now, Eva. Be prepared." "I am," I assured her. "I have to be." A sense of calm settled over me. I was taking control, no longer a victim to Aaron's games. Each step I took solidified my resolve. With Jessie's support, I began the process of revoking Aaron's access to everything connected to me. I changed locks, updated passwords, and informed everyone involved about the situation. Aaron's courage crumbled slowly but surely. He found himself cut off, no longer able to manipulate or control me. I watched from a distance as his fake facade started to fall apart, revealing the true coward behind the mask. I knew the ultimate face-off was coming, but until then, I kept my defenses strong, prepared for whatever Aaron had left in his arsenal. This was only the beginning, and I was ready for the fight. Aaron's arrogance boiled over when he realized I had sealed off all his access to the finances. One evening, as Jessie and I were catching up on the latest details, my phone rang. It was an unknown number. "Hello?" I answered tentatively. "You think you've won, Eva?" Aaron's voice was seething with anger. "You've just made the biggest mistake of your life." "That's your opinion," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. "What do you want, Aaron?" "I want what's mine, and you will give it to me," he hissed. "You're not getting anything, Aaron. It's over." I hung up, feeling a mixture of fear and strength. Jessie looked at me, concern in her eyes. "He's not going to give up easily, Eva. Be careful." "I know," I sighed, "but I'm ready." The next day, I decided to take more decisive action. I went to the local police station to explain my situation. Officer James listened carefully, taking notes. "Based on what you've told me, We can file a restraining order against him, he said, handing me the paperwork. It won't stop his calls, but it might make him think twice before showing up. Thank you, I said, filling out the forms. This means a lot. Returning to Jesse's place, I felt a little more secure. That evening, Jesse and I were having dinner when there was a loud knock at the door. Jesse peeked through the window and turned pale. It's Aaron and his mother, Lydia. Open up, Eva, Aaron shouted from outside. We need to talk. I stood my ground. Go away, Aaron. You have no right to be here. Lydia's voice cut through the air. You'll regret this, Eva. We've done nothing wrong. You've done plenty wrong, I snapped back. Leave or I'll call the police. Aaron pounded on the door harder. You can't hide forever. With shaky hands, I dialed 911. There's a man at my door threatening me. I have a restraining order against him. We're on our way, the dispatcher assured me. I hung up and glared at the door. You're making this worse for yourself, Aaron. Minutes later, the police arrived. Officers led a furious Aaron and a downcast Lydia away. Aaron's final words, "This isn't over," echoed as they drove off. Jesse hugged me tightly. You did the right thing, Eva. Stay strong. The next morning, I sent the divorce papers through certified mail, ensuring Aaron's access to everything connected to me was revoked. I needed to make sure he understood there was no way back. Later that week, Lydia's car was gone from Aaron's driveway. Word had spread quickly about their confrontation with the police. Jesse and I sat in the living room, a sense of relief washing over me. It's not going to be easy, but I think we've turned a corner, I said. You've got this, Eva, Jesse reassured me. You're stronger than you know. I nodded, the weight of uncertainty lifting. The storm was far from over, but for the first time in a long while I felt ready to face it head-on. Every step forward was a step away from Aaron's toxic grip. The ultimate showdown was on the horizon, and I was prepared to win. A few days after the police escorted Aaron and Lydia away, I returned to work at the bookstore, hoping for a sense of normalcy. It was a quiet afternoon when my phone buzzed. It was a message from Jesse. Aaron and Lydia here now. Be careful. My heart pounded. Moments later, the bell above the shop's door jingled, and they stormed in. Aaron's eyes were cold, and Lydia's face was twisted with anger. You can't run, Eva, Aaron said, striding towards the counter. You think you can just cut me off and hide? I stood my ground. This is not your place, Aaron. Leave, or I'll call the police again. Lydia slammed her hand on the counter. You're making a mistake. You think you're so clever, but you'll lose everything. I clenched my fists. Get out, now. We had a deal, Eva, Aaron sneered, leaning closer. You agreed to share everything, but you've gone behind my back. No, Aaron, you broke our trust, I shot back. You lied and manipulated me. Now you're facing the consequences. Consequences? Lydia spat. You'll regret dragging my family through the mud. You have no proof of anything. I looked her in the eye. I have more than enough proof. You impersonated me at the bank, committed fraud. You and Aaron will pay for this. Aaron's face twisted with rage. You don't scare us, Eva. We can ruin you. I held up my phone, recording their every word. Say all you want, but this is going to the authorities. You'll pay for everything you've done. The door pushed open, and my boss, Mr. Reed, stepped in. He took one look at the scene and approached. Is there a problem here? These people were just leaving, I said firmly, glaring at Aaron and Lydia. Aaron let out a bitter laugh. You haven't heard the last of this. Lydia added, You made the wrong enemies, Eva. Mr. Reed folded his arms, towering over them. You heard her. Leave now, or I'm calling the police. Aaron and Lydia stormed out, muttering curses under their breath. I sagged against the counter, relief flooding through me. You okay? Mr. Reed asked, concern in his eyes. Thank you, I said, taking a deep breath. I'm fine. Just some unresolved issues. He nodded. If they come back, don't hesitate to call for help. I watched as Aaron and Lydia sped away, their threats ringing in my ears. But I wasn't afraid anymore. Their desperation was clear. It only made me stronger. That evening, I met with my lawyer and handed over the latest evidence. They showed up at my workplace, made threats. I recorded it all, I explained. He nodded, a grim smile on his face. This strengthens our case. We'll bring everything to light in court. Leaving his office, I felt a renewed sense of determination. I was ready for the next step. Aaron and Lydia had tried to intimidate me, but they were the ones who would pay dearly. As I drove back to Jesse's, my phone rang. It was her. Everything okay, Eva? Yeah, everything's fine. Just had a run-in with Aaron and Lydia at work, but we're moving forward. Good, Jessie said. Stay strong. You're almost there. I will, I promised, feeling the weight of her support. The ultimate showdown loomed on the horizon, and I knew I wouldn't face it alone. The fight for justice and peace had only just begun, but I was more than ready to see it through. The courtroom was packed. Aaron and Lydia sat across from me, their eyes burning with indignation. This was it, the moment of truth. My lawyer, Mr. Carter, stood and presented our case. Your Honor, we have clear evidence of fraud and deceit committed by Aaron and Lydia against my client, Eva. They have manipulated finances, attempted illegal access to accounts, and made explicit threats. Aaron's lawyer tried to defend him. Your Honor, these accusations are exaggerated. Aaron was just managing shared finances, and any accusations of fraud are unfounded. Unfounded? Mr. Carter countered, handing over the recording. This recording, taken by Eva, explicitly captures Aaron and Lydia's threats and admissions of their actions. The judge leaned forward, listening intently. Aaron's face fell as his own voice echoed through the courtroom, spouting hate and threats. Lydia's expression turned cold, realization dawning on her. Enough, the judge said, raising a hand. Turning to Aaron and Lydia, he continued, I have heard enough to make my decision. Aaron looked panicked. Your Honor, I was under a lot of stress. I didn't mean those things. It's too late for excuses, the judge replied sternly. The evidence is clear. You have committed fraud and shown a clear pattern of manipulation and abuse. Lydia stood up, desperation in her eyes. Please, Your Honor, we didn't mean any harm. Sit down, the judge commanded, and Lydia obeyed, her face ashen. The judge's gavel came down with a sense of finality. Aaron and Lydia are to repay the misappropriated funds and will face legal consequences for their fraudulent actions. I breathed a sigh of relief. It was over. Justice had been served. Aaron's face crumbled, tears of anger and disbelief streaming down his cheeks. Lydia looked defeated, her plans falling apart before her eyes. Outside the courthouse, Mr. Carter gave me a reassuring smile. You did well, Eva. This is a significant victory. Thank you, I said, feeling the weight lift off my shoulders. Now you need to focus on rebuilding your life, Mr. Carter advised. You've shown incredible strength. Walking away from the courthouse, I saw Aaron being led away, handcuffed. He caught my eye, his rage clear. You haven't seen the last of me, he growled. I didn't reply, just kept walking. His power over me was gone. That evening, Jessie and I celebrated quietly. To new beginnings, she toasted. To freedom, I echoed, clinking glasses. Aaron's downfall was public and complete. He lost his job, his reputation, and now faced a significant financial penalty. Lydia withdrew into isolation, her social standing tarnished beyond repair. My life was far from perfect, but I felt hopeful for the first time in years. The storm had passed, leaving behind the wreckage of Aaron's deceit. I was ready to rebuild, stronger and wiser than before. As I went to bed that night, I couldn't help but smile. The fight was over, the battle won. And while Aaron and Lydia faced the consequences of their actions, I had reclaimed my life. The scars would heal, and with each passing day, I would find peace and strength anew. The weeks after the court ruling were a whirlwind. Life slowly started to piece itself back together. I stabilized my job at the bookstore, dived into work, and found solace in the daily routine. Jessie remained my rock, always there with a reassuring word or a comforting hug. One afternoon, while shelving some books, a soft-spoken voice interrupted my thoughts. Excuse me, could you help me find The Great Gatsby? I turned to see a tall man with gentle eyes and a warm smile. Sure, it's just over here, I said, leading him to the classics section. Thank you, he said, looking thoughtfully at the books. I'm Patrick, by the way. Eva, I replied, shaking his hand. Do you need help with anything else? Patrick smiled. Just looking for something good to read. Any recommendations? We spent the next few minutes talking about books. There was something calming about him, an air of genuine kindness I hadn't experienced in a long time. Over the coming weeks, Patrick became a regular customer, and then a friend. One evening, as I closed the store, Patrick waited outside. Care for a coffee? He asked, a hopeful expression on his face. Sure. I nodded, feeling a nervous excitement. At the cafe, the conversation flowed easily. Patrick shared his love for literature, his adventures as a travel writer. I listened, feeling a warmth I hadn't felt in years. Eva, You're amazing, Patrick said, his eyes sincere. You've been through so much, yet here you are, standing strong. I smiled, blushing slightly. It hasn't been easy, but I've had good friends to help me. He reached across the table, gently squeezing my hand. I'd like to be one of those friends, if you'll let me. We continued to see each other, slowly building a bond. Patrick was careful, gentle, never pushing, always respectful. It was refreshing, a stark contrast to the chaos Aaron had brought into my life. One afternoon, while sorting through some old photos, I found a picture of Michael. Tears welled up in my eyes. Jessie, noticing my distress, sat beside me. It's okay to remember, Eva, she said softly. It's part of healing. Michael was my safe place, I whispered. I miss him every day, and it's okay to miss him, Jessie said, but you deserve happiness too. It was as if a weight had lifted. The memories of Michael would always be a part of me, but they didn't have to anchor me to the past. They could live alongside new memories, new happiness. Months went by, and Patrick stayed by my side. One day, as we walked through the park, he stopped and looked at me. Eva, I care deeply for you. Will you let me be a part of your life? It was a big step, but I felt ready. Yes, Patrick, I'd like that. In that moment, I realized I had regained control of my life. Aaron's shadow no longer loomed over me. He faced the consequences of his actions, a stark contrast to the bright, hopeful future I was beginning to see. Patrick and I took things slow, building a relationship based on trust and care. I was mindful, ensuring not to repeat past mistakes. Each day felt like a new chapter, filled with cautious optimism and growing confidence. Eva's journey felt complete. From the darkness brought by Aaron, I had emerged stronger, resilient. With Patrick by my side, and Jessie always there to support me, I felt a sense of peace and hope. The storm had passed, and the future looked bright. In the end, it was not just about the revenge or the drama. It was about reclaiming my life, learning to trust again, and finding a balanced new beginning. And in that, I found my true strength. The rusted lock gave way with a sharp tug, the heavy iron door creaking open to reveal a dimly lit space within the decrepit shed. As my eyes adjusted, a faint whimper reached my ears, the unmistakable sound of a child's muffled cries. "Hello?" I called out, my voice trembling. "Is someone there?" Silence. Steeling my nerves, I stepped inside, the musty air assaulting my senses. Rays of sunlight streamed through cracks in the walls, illuminating a small, huddled figure in the corner. I gasped, covering my mouth to stifle the cry that threatened to escape. It was a young girl, her frail body curled into a tight ball, stringy blonde hair obscuring her face. At the sound of my footsteps, she froze, her cries turning to ragged breaths. "It's okay. I won't hurt you," I said, my words gentle yet firm. "My name is Evelyn. I'm here to help." Slowly, she lifted her head, and our eyes met. Piercing blue orbs, haunted yet defiant, stared back at me, the gaze of one far older than her years. A surge of recognition washed over me, coupled with disbelief and horror. "Eliza?" I whispered, the name I never thought I'd utter again. "Eliza Carson?" Her brow furrowed, confusion flickering across her delicate features. Of course, she wouldn't recognize me. We'd never met. Eliza Carson was Clayton's cousin, presumed dead after a boating accident 6 years ago when she was only 6 years old. Her body was never recovered, but the entire community mourned her loss. "How do you know my name?" Her small voice quivered, laced with equal parts fear and desperation. "Eliza, it's me, Evelyn. I'm married to your cousin Clayton." I inched closer, my hands raised in a placating gesture. "You're safe now, I promise. I'll get you out of here." Her eyes widened, realization dawning. "You have to go," she pleaded, shrinking back. "If he finds out, you know—" The shed's entrance slammed open, the force sending a tremor through the floorboards. I whirled around to find Clayton, his expression a mix of shock and trepidation. "Evelyn?" His gaze flickered between us, confusion rapidly giving way to panic. "What are you doing here? Get away from her!" I stood my ground, shielding Eliza with my body. "Clayton, what is going on? Why is your cousin, who everyone thought was dead, locked up in this shed?" His Adam's apple bobbed as he swallowed hard. "You don't understand. It's not what it looks like." "Then explain it to me," I demanded, my voice rising. "Because right now it looks like your family has been lying and keeping a little girl prisoner for God knows how long." Eliza flinched at my outburst, and I softened my tone. "Please, Clayton, she's just a child. Whatever this is about, we need to get her out of here and to safety." Clayton's shoulders slumped, defeated. He opened his mouth to speak, but the words died on his lips as a booming voice echoed from outside. What in the blazes is going on here? My blood turned to ice as Terrence Carson, Clayton's uncle and the family patriarch, appeared in the doorway, his imposing figure casting a long shadow over us all. Terrence's eyes narrowed as they settled on Eliza's frail form cowering behind me. A cruel sneer twisted his weathered features. Well, seems the little brat has been discovered. He spat the words like venom. Didn't think you'd last this long, girl. I tensed, shielding Eliza further from his menacing glare. What is the meaning of this, Terrence? Why have you been keeping a child locked up like some animal? He scoffed, unfazed by my accusation. That's none of your concern, Missy. You've stuck your nose where it don't belong. Like hell it's not my concern, I shot back, fury rising within me. This is my family, too, and I have a right to know what kind of depravity you've been up to. Terrence advanced, his bulky frame towering over me. You watch your tone, girl. This is my land, my family. What I do here is my business. Clayton stepped between us, his arms extended. Uncle Terrence, please. There's no need for this. Let's just take a breath and... And what, boy? Terrence snarled, rounding on his nephew. You gonna take her side over your own blood, after everything I've done for this family? Clayton faltered, his eyes flitting between us, torn. Seizing the opportunity, I pressed on. Clayton, look at me. You know this is wrong. Whatever your uncle's reasons, keeping a child prisoner is unforgivable. We have to get Eliza out of here and to the authorities. Terrence barked a harsh laugh. The authorities? You think that sheriff buddy of yours will lift a finger against me? I own half this goddamn town, girl. No one's gonna believe the ramblings of some outsider over the word of a Carson. His words chilled me to the bone, but I refused to back down. We'll see about that. I'm not afraid of you, Terrence. Not anymore. With a surprising burst of strength, I grabbed Eliza's hand and pulled her towards the exit. Terrence made a move to stop us, but Clayton held him back, his expression pained but resolute. As we burst out into the open air, I heard Terrence's roar of fury echoing behind us. This ain't over, you hear me? You're gonna regret this, Evelyn Carson. I'll make sure of it. We ran, putting as much distance between us and that wretched place as possible. Eliza's small hand trembled in mine, but she didn't slow, her resilience evident despite her ordeal. Finally, we reached the safety of town, and I ushered her into the back of my truck, out of sight. Her wide, haunted eyes met mine, brimming with a mixture of fear and hope. What happens now? She whispered, her voice small, but laced with steel. I cupped her face gently, determination blazing within me. Now, we fight back. We're going to expose what Terrence has done, and make sure he can never hurt anyone again. A faint smile tugged at her cracked lips, and she nodded, the first spark of life I'd seen in her since our fateful encounter. As I gunned the engine, peeling out of the sleepy town that harbored such horrors, I knew there was no turning back. Terrence had made it personal, and I would stop at nothing to bring him to justice, both for Eliza's sake and my own. The game was afoot, and I would see this through to the bitter end, no matter what stood in my way. Terrence's reign of terror was about to come crashing down, and God help anyone who tried to stop me. My truck rumbled to a stop outside the sheriff's station, the engine still growling angrily as I killed the ignition. Eliza peered out the window, her small frame tense with apprehension. It's okay, I said, giving her hand a reassuring squeeze. Marcus is a good man. He'll help us. She nodded mutely, chewing her lip as we exited the vehicle. The station's double doors swung open, and Marcus himself strode out, a concerned crease etched into his brow. Evelyn, what's going on? His gaze landed on Eliza, and his eyes widened. Is that... It's a long story, I replied grimly. We need to talk, in private. Understanding flashed across his features as he ushered us inside, his demeanor all business. Once sequestered in his office, I wasted no time recounting the harrowing events of the day, from discovering Eliza's confinement to Terrence's menacing threats. Marcus listened intently, his expression darkening with every detail. When I finished, he let out a low whistle, scrubbing a hand over his weathered face. Son of a bitch, he muttered. I knew Terrence Carson was a piece of work, but this... He shook his head, disgust etched into his features. You believe me, then? I pressed. You'll help us bring him down? Of course I believe you, Evelyn. He reached across his desk, clasping my hand firmly. You know I've always had your back. I'll do whatever it takes to make sure that bastard gets what's coming to him. Relief washed over me at his words, but it was short-lived as another thought occurred to me. What about Eliza's safety? Terrence won't stop until he gets her back under his control. Marcus's jaw tightened. Leave that to me. I'll set you both up somewhere secure, out of town where he can't get to you. No. The vehement protest came not from me, but from Eliza herself. We both turned to her, startled by the sudden outburst from the normally timid girl. I'm not running anymore, she declared, her eyes blazing with a fire I hadn't yet seen. That monster has kept me locked up, afraid of my own shadow for too long. I want to face him, to make him pay for what he's done. My admiration for her bravery was tempered by concern. Eliza, I understand how you feel, but nothing, she cut me off fiercely. I may be just a kid, but I'm stronger than he thinks. You said we were going to fight back, and that's what I want to do. I opened my mouth to protest further, but Marcus held up a hand, silencing me. She's right, Evelyn. His expression was grim, but resolute. If we want to take Terrence down for good, we'll need Eliza's testimony. She's the key to exposing his crimes and making sure he can't wriggle his way out of this. Eliza lifted her chin defiantly, her jaw set in determination far beyond her years. In that moment, I saw not a frightened child, but a young woman forged in the fires of unimaginable hardship, a kindred spirit with an inner strength to match my own. With a slow nod of acceptance, I turned back to Marcus. All right, what's our next move? A faint smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. First, we need to gather more evidence against Terrence, something concrete to back up Eliza's story. And for that, he paused, his gaze flickering towards the door. We'll need to bring in some extra firepower. As if on cue, there was a sharp rap at the office door. Marcus's smile widened as he called out, Come on in, Nina. We've got work to do. Nina Carson swept into the room like a whirlwind, her sharp features pinched with an expression somewhere between apprehension and distaste. Her piercing gaze settled on me, then Eliza, before flicking back to Marcus. You weren't kidding, she muttered. The kid's alive. I bristled at her dismissive tone, but Marcus held up a placating hand. Nina, you know why I called you here. We need your help taking down your father once and for all. A flicker of emotion passed over her face, a mixture of anger and hurt so fleeting I almost missed it. With a curt nod, she seemed to steel herself, smoothing her features into an impassive mask. Fine. What do you need from me? As Marcus laid out the situation, Nina listened stonily, her jaw clenched tight. When he finished, she let out a harsh bark of laughter, shaking her head in disbelief. Typical Dad, she spat. Lying, manipulating, doing whatever it takes to maintain his twisted idea of control. Her gaze landed on Eliza, softening ever so slightly. I'm sorry, kid. You didn't deserve to get caught up in his sick games. Eliza met her stare evenly, her small frame radiating a strength that belied her years. It's not your fault, she replied, her voice steady. You're not the one who kept me locked up like an animal for 6 years. An uncomfortable silence hung in the air, thick with unspoken tensions and histories I could only guess at. Finally, Nina broke it with a weary sigh. You're right. This is on him, not me. Not anymore. Her jaw set in grim determination. I'll help however I can to take the bastard down. No more lies, no more protecting him. It's time he paid for his crimes. That's what I like to hear. Marcus clapped his hands together, all business once more. First things first, we need to gather evidence, anything that can corroborate Eliza's story and prove Terrence was behind her disappearance. I might be able to help with that, Nina offered, her voice taking on a harder edge. Dad may be good at covering his tracks, but he's also arrogant as hell. Chances are he's left a trail, however faint, if we know where to look. A thin smile tugged at the corner of my mouth. Then it's a good thing we've got an insider on our side. Nina's lips curved into a matching expression, tinged with a bitterness that spoke volumes. Believe me, I know all about the Carson family's dirty little secrets. Let's just say dear old Dad wasn't exactly Father of the Year material. As she delved into the sordid details, my anger towards Terrence Carson only intensified, both for Eliza's horrific mistreatment and the web of manipulation he'd spun around his own flesh and blood. This man's villainy knew no bounds, tainting everything and everyone he touched like a malignant blight. But not for much longer. With Marcus's tenacity, Eliza's bravery, and Nina's inside knowledge, we would unravel Terrence's schemes thread by thread until he had nowhere left to hide. Come hell or high water, he would face justice, both for his sake and mine. When Nina finished her grim recounting, I turned to Marcus, my expression hardening with resolve. Where do we start? The sheriff leaned back in his chair, a feral glint in his eye. At the beginning, we're going to dig into every inch of Terrence's life, turn over every rock until we find the proof to bury that son of a bitch for good. He paused, letting the weight of his words sink in before continuing grimly. Whatever it takes. The Carson family estate loomed ahead, its wrought iron gates an imposing barrier guarding the secrets that lurked within. Nina gripped the steering wheel tightly as we approached, her knuckles white with tension. "You sure about this, Evelyn?" she asked, her voice tight. "There's no going back after we cross that line." I eyed the foreboding manor, feeling its dark presence like a weight pressing down on me. "I'm sure. It's time we got some answers, straight from the devil's mouth." Nina gave a grim nod before punching in the code, the gates grinding open with a piercing shriek of metal on metal. We pulled through, the tires crunching over the gravel drive as we neared the main house. Lorraine Carson was waiting on the porch, her arms crossed defensively over her chest. As we climbed out of the car, her pinched expression softened briefly at the sight of her daughter. "Nina, what are you doing here?" Her gaze landed on me, eyes narrowing to slits. "And you brought her? After everything that's happened?" "That's exactly why we're here, Mother," Nina replied coolly. "We know what Dad's been up to, about Eliza. It's over." Lorraine flinched as if struck, panic flitting across her features before being hastily masked by a stony facade. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Can it, Mom?" Nina snapped, her patience clearly waning. "The lying, the cover-ups, it all stops now. We're going to take that sick bastard down, and you're either with us or against us." A tense silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken history and roiling emotions. Finally, Lorraine's shoulders sagged in defeat. "You always did have a way of cutting through the bullshit, Nina." She sighed, suddenly looking every one of her 53 years. "I suppose I can't keep denying it any longer." Gesturing for us to follow, she led the way inside, her measured steps echoing hollowly through the cavernous foyer. My gaze swept over the opulent trappings, gilded mirrors, priceless antiques, and not a single personal touch to be seen. Like a museum frozen in time, devoid of warmth or life. How fitting for the Carson family. Lorraine ushered us into a dimly lit study, the heavy drapes drawn against the dying sun outside. A glass of amber liquid sat untouched on the mahogany desk, a telltale sign of its occupant's recent presence. At our entrance, Terrence rose from the worn leather armchair, his expression thunderous. "What is the meaning of this intrusion?" he growled, his eyes flicking between Nina and me with undisguised contempt. "I don't recall inviting you piranhas into my home." "Can it, Terrence?" Lorraine said, her voice low but laced with a surprising venom. "We're done with your lies, your deceptions. It's time we settled this, once and for all." For a fraction of a second, a flicker of unease passed over Terrence's craggy features. There and gone so quickly, I wondered if I'd imagined it. Just as swiftly, the mask of arrogance slammed back into place, his lips curling into a contemptuous sneer. "So the family betrayers have come to rally against me, have they?" He shook his head with a mocking chuckle. "You're welcome to try, but you'll find I'm not so easily cowed." "We'll see about that," I bit out, barely containing my fury. "We know what you did to Eliza, you twisted son of a bitch. Keeping a child locked up like an animal for your own sick gratification? That's a new low, even for you." His gaze locked with mine, cold and unflinching. "You have no idea what you're talking about, girl. Everything I've done, everything, has been for the preservation and protection of this family's legacy." Terrence's words hung in the air like a noxious cloud, his twisted justification chilling me to the core. Before I could formulate a response, Nina stepped forward, her eyes blazing with barely contained rage. "That's enough of your rationalizations, you sick fuck," she spat. "We're done playing by your rules. Eliza is safe, the jig is up, and you're going to pay for what you've done." A muscle twitched in Terrence's jaw, the first crack in his impassive facade. "You ungrateful little bitch," he snarled, his voice low and menacing. "After everything I've sacrificed for this family, This is how you repay me? Sacrificed? Nina let out a harsh bark of laughter. Is that what you call systematically destroying us from the inside out? Alienating Mom? Driving me away with your toxic vitriol? Wake up, you delusional bastard. The only thing you've ever cared about is maintaining your twisted power trip. I could see the fury building in Terrence like a raging inferno, his body practically vibrating with the effort of restraining it. When he spoke again, his tone was soft, almost gentle. Nina, you have no idea the things I've had to do to preserve our legacy, the sacrifices, the difficult choices. His gaze bored into her, sharp as flint. You think I wanted to do what I did to Eliza, that I took pleasure in it? The air left my lungs in a shocked rush. Terrence's admission hung there, visceral and horrifying. Nina looked equally sickened, her skin taking on an ashen pallor. You monster, she choked out. How could you? How could I? Terrence roared, the floodgates finally bursting open. That sniveling brat was a liability, a blight on our family's good name. She had to be dealt with, made to disappear for the greater good. My hands curled into white-knuckled fists at my sides as a wave of revulsion crashed over me. This man's depravity knew no bounds, not even when it came to his own flesh and blood. So you admit it, I bit out through gritted teeth. You're the one who made Eliza disappear, then kept her locked up like a prisoner all these years. A cruel smile twisted Terrence's lips. Give the girl a prize. Yes, I orchestrated the whole thing. The boating accident, the fake investigation, all of it. And you want to know the real kicker? He leaned forward, his eyes glittering with perverse glee. Her own sniveling parents were in on it from the start. A startled gasp from Lorraine was the only sound in the deafening silence that followed. Nina looked utterly shell-shocked, her mouth working soundlessly as she struggled to process her father's horrific revelation. It was Marcus who finally broke the stillness, his voice hard as tempered steel. That's more than enough confession. With a deft movement, he had his sidearm leveled squarely at Terrence's chest, his expression utterly devoid of mercy. Terrence Carson, you're under arrest for the kidnapping, unlawful imprisonment, and endangerment of a minor. You have the right to remain silent. As Marcus recited the Miranda rights, cuffing the now ranting Terrence with practiced efficiency, I caught Nina's eye across the room. The anguish and betrayal etched on her features said it all, the last thread of family loyalty severed for good. No matter what came next, there would be no coming back from this day. Terrence's web of lies and manipulation had finally been laid bare, the depth of his evil exposed for all to see. My path was clear now, forged in the fires of this hard-won truth. By whatever means necessary, I would ensure Terrence faced the full weight of justice for his unspeakable crimes. If it was the last thing I did, he would pay. The courthouse was a madhouse, swarming with reporters and gawkers, desperate for a glimpse of the sordid drama about to unfold. I pushed my way through the throngs, Eliza's small hand clutched tightly in mine as we forged a path towards the imposing oak doors. Just keep your head down, I murmured, shielding her from the flashing cameras and shouted questions. It'll be over soon. She gave a tiny nod, her jaw set in a determined line far beyond her years. Despite her diminutive stature, she carried herself with a quiet strength that never failed to fill me with awe and a fierce protectiveness. No matter what, I would ensure Terrence Carson paid for what he'd done to this remarkable girl. The courtroom itself was mercifully hushed, the air thick with tension as we filed in alongside the prosecution. My gaze immediately found Terrence, seated ramrod straight at the defendant's table, his expression one of haughty disdain. Our eyes locked for a brief moment, a silent challenge passing between us. A cruel smirk curved his thin lips, sending an icy shiver down my spine. That twisted son of a bitch was up to something. I could feel it in my bones. As the proceedings got underway, I found my attention divided between the testimonies and Terrence's every-minute shift and reaction. He remained infuriatingly inscrutable, betraying none of the turmoil that must have been roiling beneath that impeccably composed facade. It wasn't until Eliza was called to the stand that the first hairline fractures began to show. She was so small up there, positively dwarfed by the imposing witness box. But when she lifted her head and fixed Terrence with those haunted blue eyes, there was an unshakable resolve blazing within them that defied her fragile stature. Tell us, Miss Carson, the prosecutor prompted gently. In your own words, what happened the night you disappeared 6 years ago? A hushed stillness descended over the courtroom as Eliza drew a fortifying breath. When she spoke, her voice rang out clear and unwavering. It was my uncle, Terence. He took me from my parents' house late one night, told me we were going on a secret adventure. She recounted the harrowing tale in disturbing detail, the staged boating accident, the wrath hole in which she'd been imprisoned all these years, the mind games and emotional torment at Terence's hands. With every new revelation, I could see the cracks in Terence's composure deepening, his knuckles whitening around the arms of his chair. And he said I had to stay hidden, that no one could know I was alive, not even my own parents. Eliza's voice began to waver, but she pressed on with heart-rending bravery. He said it was for the good of the family. By the time she finished, there wasn't a dry eye in the courtroom. Even the most hardened observers seemed shaken by the graphic injustice laid bare before them, all except Terence. As Eliza was finally excused, his booming voice rang out, shattering the somber silence like a thunderclap. "You little lying bitch!" Before anyone could react, he'd surged to his feet, teeth bared in an animalistic snarl as he lunged towards the witness stand and Eliza. A collective gasp went up from the gallery, but I was already in motion, hurling myself bodily between the raging monster and his target. His hands found my throat, cutting off my airway with bruising force as we crashed backwards. Black spots danced across my vision, but I clawed desperately at his vice-like grip, a primal surge of adrenaline propelling me. Not this time, you bastard. Not her. Not my family. Distantly, I was aware of pandemonium erupting around us, shouting, scuffling, the distant wail of sirens. But all that existed in that moment was the furious pounding of my heart, the burning need for air, and Terence's pitiless face looming over me, twisted in a sadistic leer of triumph. Then, as suddenly as it had begun, the pressure was gone. I sucked in a ragged gasp, blinking against the dark blot still obscuring my sight. When my vision finally cleared, I saw Terence being swarmed by a sea of bodies, dragging his thrashing form away as he spewed vile curses and threats. Marcus was there, features set in a mask of cold fury as he slapped the cuffs back on the raving man's wrists. And in the eye of the storm's aftermath stood Eliza, gazing at me with those wise, haunted eyes, the eyes of one who had witnessed the true depths of human cruelty, yet emerged from the abyss unbowed. As our eyes met, a silent understanding passed between us. No matter what it took, we had won this day. Terence Carson's reign of terror was over. The rain fell in a soft drizzle, misting the air with a gentle haze as I made my way down the familiar dirt path. Overhead, the iron-gray clouds parted enough to allow a few feeble rays of sunlight to pierce through, bathing the Carson family cemetery in a somber glow. I'd been here too many times over the past year, first for Clayton's mother Lorraine's funeral after her untimely passing, then for the hearings and sentencing that finally saw Terence put behind bars for the rest of his natural life. Each visit had been more somber than the last, the weight of this place's history like a shroud draped over my shoulders. But not today. Today, I carried a renewed sense of purpose, a lift in my step that had been sorely missing for far too long. As I neared the secluded corner where the newest edition lay, a small figure came into view, sitting cross-legged before the simple granite headstone. "There you are," I called out softly, unable to keep the faint smile from tugging at my lips. "I was wondering where you'd gotten off to." Eliza turned, her face breaking into a warm smile that still managed to take my breath away after all this time. In the 2 years since her harrowing rescue and Terence's downfall, she'd blossomed from a haunted waif into a vibrant, healthy young woman. Her eyes shining with a light I'd once feared was extinguished forever. "Sorry, I just needed a moment," she replied, her gaze drifting back to the gravestone with a wistful expression. "It still doesn't feel real sometimes, you know? After everything." I settled onto the damp grass beside her, draping an arm around her shoulders. She immediately leaned into my embrace with a contented sigh. "I know it's been an incredible adjustment after what that monster put you through," I murmured, pressing a gentle kiss to the crown of her head. "But you've handled it with more strength and grace than anyone could have hoped for, sweetheart. You're an inspiration to us all." A faint blush colored her cheeks at the praise, but her lips curved upwards in that radiant smile once more. "I had a good role model," she said simply, reaching out to grasp my free hand in her slender fingers. "If it wasn't for you, Evelyn, I might have never." Her voice trailed off, but I could hear the unspoken meaning loud and clear. I gave her hand a reassuring squeeze, a silent promise that those nightmarish days were firmly in the past, now. "Well, you'll never have to worry about that again," I assured her fiercely. "Terrence is gone for good, and the rest of us, we're going to be just fine." We lapsed into a comfortable silence, turning our attention back to the gravestone and the words etched into its timeless surface. "In memory of Eliza Carson, beloved daughter, cousin, and friend, may you forever rest in peace." So much pain, so much heartache had stemmed from those 5 simple words, a tragic lie perpetrated by a deeply disturbed man blinded by his own greed and depravity. But in the end, it was a truth that had set Eliza free from her suffering, giving her a new lease on the life that had nearly been stolen away. A gentle breeze rustled the trees overhead, carrying the first hints of spring, of new beginnings and fresh starts. I watched contentedly as the wind tousled Eliza's golden tresses, her face tilted towards the pale sunlight filtering through the clouds like a flower unfurling its petals. There was still healing to be done, scars that may never fully fade. But in that moment, bathed in nature's delicate renewal, I felt a profound sense of peace and hope, our future. The nightmare was finally over. It was time to awaken to the world anew. As Eliza and I rose, hand in hand, to make our way back home, I silently vowed that from this day forward, we would embrace each moment with open hearts and minds. No longer shackled by the shadows of Terrence's malice, we would bask in the warm glow of hard-won justice and dare to dream of what lay ahead. A new dawn was on the horizon, burning bright and radiant with possibilities, and we would greet it together, unafraid.
My name is Brenda Collins. At 29 years old, I have a job at the local library in an obscure small town that more than likely no one embodies any knowledge of. My life is easy, maybe too boring for some, but it's mine. I was always a quiet one, for whom voices of the world outside were often too loud. The library is my sanctuary. The floors creak and the shelves are banged up. It's an old small building, but to me, I'd like to think it's spotless. I open up the library at 8 o'clock each morning to light, and that smoky smell of well-loved books, a routine that never becomes tiresome. My parents passed away when I was young, so I was raised by my grandmother. She was a kind woman, always encouraging me to read and learn. But she's gone now too, and I'm all alone. No siblings, no close relatives, just me and my small world. "Good morning, Brenda." Mr. Jenkins, a regular visitor, greets me as he walks in. He's an elderly man who spends his days reading history books. "Good morning, Mr. Jenkins. The new shipment of history books arrived yesterday. I set them aside for you." I reply with a smile. "Ah, you know me too well, dear," he chuckles, shuffling towards the designated shelf. The day goes on like this, with familiar faces coming and going. I help a group of kids find books for their school project, recommend a romance novel to Mrs. Harrison, and guide Mr. Thompson to the science fiction section. It's a quiet life, but I like it. I find comfort in the predictability, the routine. And then one day, everything changed. The day Jack walked into my life. He came in looking for a book, but I could tell he wasn't the regular library type. He seemed out of place with his crisp suit and confident stride. "Can you help me find a book?" he asked, his voice smooth and inviting. "Of course. What are you looking for?" I replied, trying to keep my composure. "It's a novel, The Great Gatsby." "I believe," he said. "Right this way," I said, leading him to the classics section. As I handed him the book, our hands brushed briefly, sending a jolt through me. It was a simple touch, but it lingered in my mind. "Thank you, Brenda," he said, reading my name tag. "I'm Jack. It's nice to meet you." "Jack," I replied. That brief encounter marked the beginning of everything. The beginning of a love that I thought would last a lifetime. The beginning of a journey that would take me from the quiet life I knew into a world of chaos and betrayal. If only I had known then what I know now. Maybe things would have been different. But life doesn't come with a warning label, and sometimes we just have to learn the hard way. After that first meeting, Jack began to visit the library more frequently. It was odd, considering he didn't strike me as the reading type. But every time he came in, he'd ask for a book recommendation, and then spend a few minutes chatting with me. One day, he walked in just as I was struggling with a box of newly arrived books. "Need a hand with that?" he offered, walking over. "That would be great, thanks," I said. As we placed the books on the shelves, he asked, "So, Brenda, what got you into working at a library?" I shrugged. "I've always loved books. They're like friends, you know. Plus, it's nice and quiet here." He laughed. "I can see that. It's like a whole different world." Our conversations grew longer with each visit. I found out that Jack worked in his family's business, something to do with real estate. He was easy to talk to, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like someone was genuinely interested in me. Then one day, he surprised me. "Brenda, would you like to have dinner with me tonight?" he asked, a hopeful look in his eyes. I was taken aback. "Like a date?" "Yes, like a date," he smiled. I hesitated. This was new territory for me, but there was something about him that made me want to say yes. "Okay, sure. I'd like that," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. We went to a small restaurant in town. It wasn't fancy, but it was cozy. We talked about everything and nothing, and for a few hours, I forgot about my usually solitary life. Walking home, Jack said, "I had a really great time tonight, Brenda. You're very different from the people I usually meet." I didn't know how to respond, so I just smiled. He continued, "I'd like to see you again. Would that be okay?" I nodded. Yes, I'd like that. From then on, we started seeing each other more regularly. He'd take me out to dinner, or we'd go for walks. It was nice. For once, I felt like I was part of something more, part of a world that wasn't just about books and quietness. It wasn't long before I fell for him hard. He was charming and attentive, and he made me feel special. And when he proposed, I didn't hesitate. I said yes. Looking back, I wish I had seen the signs. I wish I had known that the charm was just a mask, a cover for something much less pleasant. But love has a way of blinding you, of making you ignore the warning signs, and I was very much in love, or at least I thought I was. After Jack and I got engaged, things started to change. It began with his parents. They didn't approve of me from the start. They thought I was below their son because I didn't come from money. The first time I met them, it was clear they didn't like me. We were at their house for dinner, and I was nervous. It was a big, fancy house, nothing like what I was used to. "Brenda, this is my mother, Margaret, and my father, Richard," Jack introduced. "Nice to meet you," I said, trying to smile. Margaret looked me up and down. So you're the girl who works at the library." "Yes, I am," I replied, feeling smaller by the second. Richard chimed in, "Jack, couldn't you find someone more suitable?" I felt like crawling into a hole. The dinner was long and uncomfortable. They made it clear they thought I wasn't good enough for their son, but Jack stood up for me, which made me love him even more. Before our wedding, they insisted on a prenuptial agreement. They said it was just a formality. I didn't have much to lose, so I agreed without making a fuss. Once we got married, I moved into Jack's house, which was actually his parents' house. They had given it to him as a wedding gift, but they acted like it was still theirs. His parents came over all the time, unannounced. They'd walk in and start ordering me around. "Brenda, make us some coffee," Margaret would demand as soon as she walked in, and I would, without saying anything. I didn't want to cause trouble. One day, Margaret pointed at the TV and said, "Remember, Brenda, in case of divorce, you can't claim this." It was like that with everything. They reminded me constantly that everything in the house wasn't mine. Jack started changing too. He wasn't the man I fell in love with. He started joining in on the jokes his parents made about me. One evening, I was trying to decide what to wear for a family event. I asked Jack for his opinion. "This one makes you look less drab," he said, laughing. I was hurt. It was like he was a different person around his parents. He didn't stand up for me anymore. Instead, he laughed along with them. It was exhausting living in that house. I felt like an outsider, an unwanted guest. I kept hoping things would get better, but they only got worse. The stress got to me. I started having stomach pains, bad ones. I tried to ignore them, but one day I collapsed at the library. I woke up in the hospital. The doctor said it was stress-related. I was in the hospital for a few days. Jack didn't visit. He didn't even call. I felt so alone. Then one day, a notary came to my room. He had news. My great-aunt, someone I barely remembered, had passed away, and she had left me her fortune, $30 million. I couldn't believe it. I didn't even know what to do with that kind of money, but suddenly I wasn't just the poor girl from the library anymore. When Jack and his parents found out, they came to visit. Suddenly, they were all smiles and sweetness. "Darlings, we're so happy for you," Margaret said, her voice dripping with fake concern. "Yes, we're a family. We should support each other," Richard added. I didn't buy it. It was too much of a change. After they left, I overheard them talking outside my room. They didn't know I was listening. "She's such a fool. Can you believe our luck?" Jack laughed. "We need to make sure she doesn't leave you, Jack. Maybe you should have a child with her." "That will tie her down," Margaret suggested. I felt sick to my stomach. These people didn't care about me. They just wanted my money. I knew then what I had to do. I had to get out of that house, away from these people. I had to take control of my life. I wasn't going to be their victim anymore. I left the hospital with a plan in my mind. I knew what I had to do. As I got home, Jack and his parents were waiting. They were all smiles, acting like the caring family they never were. "Oh, Brenda, we were so worried about you," Margaret exclaimed. I nodded but didn't say much. I needed to act normal, not to tip them off. Jack came closer. "So when do you get the inheritance?" he asked a little too eagerly. I looked at him, the man I thought I loved, and realized I didn't even recognize him anymore. "Soon," I said, "but it's not something you need to worry about." His smile faltered a bit. "But we're married, Brenda. What's yours is mine, right?" I forced a smile. "Of course, darling." That night, I couldn't sleep. Their voices echoed in my head, their fake concern, their greed. It made me sick. I got up and started writing. I wrote down everything they had done, everything they had said. It was like a dam had broken and years of pent-up frustration and pain poured out. The next morning, I had a meeting with a lawyer. I explained everything, showed him the prenuptial agreement. He was shocked but said the agreement would protect me. "You're doing the right thing," he assured me. When I got back, I found Jack and his parents in the living room. They looked up as I walked in. "There she is, our brave girl," Richard said with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. I sat down, clutching my purse. I have something to say. They all looked at me, curious. "I'm filing for divorce," I said, my voice steady. The room went silent. Silent, then Margaret erupted. "What? You ungrateful little. Jack was on his feet. Brenda, you can't be serious. We love you. Do you, Jack? Because I don't feel loved. I feel used. Margaret was fuming. We'll sue you. We'll take half of your inheritance. I reached into my purse and pulled out a copy of the prenuptial agreement. Actually, you can't. This says neither of us can claim the other's property in case of divorce. They were speechless. For the first time, I felt in control. I stood up. I'm leaving. I don't want any of you to contact me. I walked out of that house, their shouts and insults trailing behind me. It was the hardest thing I'd ever done, but as I drove away, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. I was free from their disdain, their manipulation. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I could breathe. I didn't know what the future held, but I knew it had to be better than the past. I rented a small apartment in the city. It was nothing fancy, but it was mine. For the first time in years, I felt a sense of peace. I was still dealing with a divorce, but I felt like I could handle it. One day, I got a call from the lawyer. Brenda, there's something you should know about your great-aunt's will. I was puzzled. What about it? There's a condition. You need to use a portion of your inheritance for a charitable cause. It was your great-aunt's final wish. I was surprised. I had no idea. The lawyer continued. She was quite the philanthropist. It seemed she wanted to pass that on to you. I hung up the phone, deep in thought. My great-aunt had given me a chance to do something good. It felt like a sign, a push in a new direction. I started researching charities and causes. I wanted to do something meaningful, something that would make a difference. That's when I stumbled upon a small organization that helped women who were victims of domestic abuse. It struck a chord with me. I contacted them and set up a meeting. The woman I met, Linda, was passionate and dedicated. We provide shelter, legal aid, and counseling to women who have nowhere else to go, Linda explained. I listened. Moved by the stories she shared, I wanted to help. I said, feeling a sense of purpose I hadn't felt in years. With Linda's guidance, I used a part of the inheritance to fund a new shelter. It was an incredible feeling, knowing I was helping other women find a way out, just like I had. A few weeks later, Linda invited me to the opening of the shelter. It was a small event, but the atmosphere was full of hope and gratitude. As people mingled, I noticed a familiar face in the crowd. It was Sarah, an old colleague from the library. Brenda, is that you? She asked, surprised. Sarah, it's been so long, I said, hugging her. What are you doing here? She asked. I told her about the shelter and my involvement. She listened, her eyes wide. That's incredible, Brenda. I had no idea, she said. It's a new chapter for me, I said, smiling. We spent the evening catching up. It felt good to reconnect with an old friend. It felt like pieces of my life were slowly falling back into place. As the event wrapped up, Linda came over. Brenda, I can't thank you enough. This shelter will change lives, she said. I looked around at the faces of the women who now had a safe place to go. It's the least I could do, I said, feeling a warmth in my heart that I hadn't felt in a very long time. The days started to blend into one another, each filled with the rewarding work at the shelter. I was finding a new sense of purpose, something that was truly mine. Then out of the blue, my phone rang. It was a number I hadn't seen in a while. Jack. My heart raced with a mixture of emotions, but curiosity prevailed. Hello, Jack, I said, my voice calm. Brenda, I need to talk to you. Can we meet? It's urgent. His voice sounded desperate. Reluctantly, I agreed to meet him at a public coffee shop, hoping that being in a familiar place would give me strength. Sitting across from Jack, he looked different, defeated, almost pitiful. His eyes were pleading. Brenda, I made a huge mistake. I want you back. I've realized how much you mean to me, he blurted out. I looked at him, feeling nothing but contempt. Why now, Jack? I asked. He sighed. My parents, they controlled everything. They were the reason our marriage failed. I was weak, but I'm different now. I felt a surge of anger. You blame your parents. You stood by while they treated me like dirt. You laughed with them. Jack reached for my hand, but I pulled away. Please, Brenda, I know I was wrong. I've changed. I stared at him, seeing the man I once loved, but now felt nothing for. Changed or not, it's too late. I feel nothing for you, Jack, nothing but contempt. His face fell, and for a moment, I saw a glimpse of the man I married, but it was fleeting. I'm sorry, Jack. I've moved on. I have a life now, a purpose. There's no place for you in it, I said firmly. He nodded slowly, a look of resignation on his face. I understand. I just had to try. Leaving the coffee shop, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. It was over, truly over. The next day, there was an event at the shelter. A local artist had donated a sculpture, and it was to be unveiled in the garden. As I stood there, surrounded by people who supported and believed in me, I felt a sense of belonging. Sarah, my old colleague from the library, stood beside me. You've done something amazing here, Brenda, she said, smiling. The artist pulled the cover off the sculpture, a figure of a woman reaching up to the sky. It symbolized hope, strength, and new beginnings. Applause filled the air, and for a moment, everything felt right in the world. Linda, the woman who had helped me so much, came over. Brenda, this is just the beginning. There's so much more we can do. I looked around at the faces filled with hope and knew she was right. This was my new beginning, and I was ready to embrace it fully. My new life was busy and fulfilling. Every day at the shelter brought new challenges and rewards. My confidence grew, and for the first time in years, I felt in control of my destiny. I even started taking self-defense classes, something I would have never imagined doing before. One day, as I was leaving the shelter, I saw a car parked outside. It was my mother-in-law, Margaret, and she stepped out as soon as she saw me. Brenda, we need to talk, she said, her voice softer than I'd ever heard. I have nothing to say to you, Margaret, I replied, my voice steady. Please just hear me out. I've realized how wrong we were, she pleaded. I stopped and looked at her. She seemed genuine, but I couldn't forget the past. What do you want, Margaret? I asked. I want to apologize. I treated you terribly. I've lost my son because of it, and I don't want to lose you too. You were like the daughter I never had, she said, her eyes glistening with tears. I felt a pang of something, sympathy, perhaps, but I pushed it away. Margaret, you made my life a living hell. An apology won't change that. I've moved on, and I suggest you do the same, I said firmly. She reached out to me, but I stepped back. Please, Brenda. I know I can't undo the past, but I want to make things right. I shook my head. It's too late for that. Goodbye, Margaret. As I walked away, I felt her gaze on my back, but I didn't look back. I had learned to stand up for myself, and there was no going back to the way things were. The next day, I received a letter from Jack's lawyer. He was contesting the divorce settlement. I wasn't surprised, but I was ready. I met with my lawyer, a sharp woman named Rachel. He's got no leg to stand on, Brenda. The prenuptial agreement is clear. He's just trying to intimidate you, she said confidently. I nodded. I'm not afraid of him anymore. Let's fight this. The court date arrived, and I walked in with my head held high. Jack was there with his lawyer, and for a moment, Our eyes met. There was a flash of the old Jack, the one I had loved, but it vanished quickly. The judge listened to both sides and then made her decision. The prenuptial agreement stood, and Jack's claims were dismissed. I felt a surge of relief and triumph. After the court session, Jack approached me. "Brenda, I'm sorry." "I was wrong," he said, his voice low. I looked at him, seeing the man I once loved, but now felt nothing for. "Goodbye, Jack. Take care of yourself," I said and walked away. As I left the courtroom, I felt a sense of closure. That chapter of my life was finally over, and a new one was just beginning. At the shelter, we were planning a fundraiser, and it was taking all my attention. The support from the community was overwhelming, and I felt a deep sense of gratitude. The night of the fundraiser arrived, and the place was buzzing with energy. People from all walks of life had come to support our cause. As I looked around, I realized how far I had come, from a quiet, timid woman to someone who stood up for herself and others. "Brenda, you did it." "This is amazing," Sarah said, coming up to me. I smiled. We did it, and there's so much more to do. As the event went on, I felt a sense of accomplishment and purpose. This was my life now, and I was exactly where I was meant to be.